The baby didn't cry. That was the first sign something was terribly wrong. She clutched the child tighter against her chest, her palms slick with sweat, the fabric of the carrier damp and clinging to her skin. Behind her, the night cracked open with a sudden shout-deep, male, furious. A door slammed. Footsteps thundered. She ran, not because she believed she could outrun him, but because her body remembered what it was to survive, even when her heart had forgotten. Her name was Eliza, though she hadn't heard it spoken gently in years. Her pale skin, once admired like porcelain in the gallery of someone else's life, now bore the smudges of dirt and old bruises. Her hands trembled as she sprinted through the alleyway, legs aching, lungs burning, but she didn't stop. Not until the city swallowed her whole. Her baby, was quiet. Always quiet. As if he'd learned that silence meant safety. As if the walls of their tiny world had taught him that to be still was to be invisible. Eliza didn't know where she was going, just that she had to go, had to disappear. Because tonight, she saw something in his eyes that she hadn't seen before. A different kind of rage. The kind that broke things that couldn't be fixed. A rusted chain-link fence blocked the alley's end. She scaled it clumsily, her boots slipping, her child pressed to her chest like a second heartbeat. On the other side, another street. Empty, cold, silent, except for the hum. A generator. She followed the sound, past dumpsters and sagging brick walls, until she saw it. An old industrial building, long abandoned but dimly lit inside. The back door hung slightly ajar. She hesitated, then stepped inside. It smelled of dust and oil and metal, and something else faintly citrus, oddly clean, like someone had tried to scrub away time itself. She crept through the wide room, her steps cautious. It might have once been a mechanic's garage or some kind of warehouse. Tools hung neatly on a wall. A single light bulb flickered overhead. It looked lived in. "Stop there," a voice said, low, calm, male. She froze. He stepped out of the shadow, tall, broad-shouldered, maybe in his late 50s. He wore an old wool coat, sleeves rolled, hands stained with grease. His hair was graying at the temples, and a deep scar sliced through one eyebrow. "I'm not here to hurt you," she said quickly, raising one hand while the other held the baby close. "Please, we just needed somewhere safe for the night." He didn't move. His eyes scanned her, then the child, then back again. "Who's after you?" he asked. She hesitated. "Does it matter?" "Yes," he said simply. Eliza's throat tightened. She hadn't cried in months, maybe years. She couldn't afford to. But something about the quiet in his tone, the stillness of the room, made her feel like she was standing at the edge of something brief, maybe. "Or Grace, my husband," she whispered. The man nodded slowly, as if confirming something to himself. Then he stepped aside. "There's a cot in the back," he said. "And hot water if the heater's still working." She blinked. "You're letting us stay? Looks like you already decided that." Eliza exhaled, her knees wobbling with relief. That night, she slept for the first time in weeks. In the morning, she found him outside, tightening bolts on an old motorcycle. He didn't look at her, but he spoke as if he'd been expecting her. "Name's Vincent," he said. "Eliza. Kid got a name? Leo." He nodded again, and she sat beside him on a crate, watching his hands move with careful precision. Not just skilled, experienced. Like someone who'd once built machines that cost more than entire apartments. "You were in the military?" she asked. He shook his head. "Private security? Long time ago." "For who?" A long pause. "People with too much money and no soul," he finally said. Then, almost under his breath, "Used to think I was one of the lucky ones." Eliza didn't press. Over the next few days, they existed quietly. She helped clean the space, cooked simple meals when she could, washed Leo's few clothes in a plastic tub near the garage's drain. Vincent didn't ask questions, but he watched, observed, like a man who'd spent years reading danger before it arrived. On the fifth night, she jolted awake to the sound of Leo coughing, a dry, rattling wheeze that made her heart stop. She rushed to his side. Fever, panic bloomed in her chest. "I need to get him to a doctor," she told Vincent. He didn't hesitate. "I'll take you." But he was already grabbing keys. They rode in silence, Vincent gripping the wheel with steady hands as he took side streets, avoiding cameras, intersections, and any place too exposed. At the clinic, he waited outside, arms crossed, jaw tight. Leo was okay. A respiratory infection. Nothing too serious. But the doctor asked too many questions, and Eliza saw the nurse make a note she couldn't read. "We can't come back here," she told Vincent in the car. He nodded, already figured. They drove for hours that night, until the city became a blur in the mirror, until gas stations looked like outposts of another world. Eventually, they pulled into a clearing deep in the woods. A cabin stood there, small, quiet, forgotten by time. "You built this?" she asked, stunned. He shook his head. Inherited it. From someone who believed in second chances. She didn't know what that meant. But she stepped inside. It smelled of cedar and old paper. A fireplace. A cot. A single shelf of books. The walls held silence, not judgment. Leo cooed softly in her arms. Eliza sat on the edge of the bed, eyes burning. Vincent stood in the doorway, watching her. "You're not just hiding," he said. "You're healing." She met his eyes. For the first time, she let herself believe he might be right. The cabin had no mirrors. Eliza realized that on her third morning there, as sunlight filtered through gauze curtains, and Leo reached for her fingers with his tiny, milk-warm hands. She sat in the quiet and tried to remember the last time she had truly looked at herself. Not just glanced, not just flinched, but seen. She couldn't recall. Maybe it was better that way. Vincent spent his days chopping wood, fixing the leaking roof, preparing the soil in the garden for planting, though it was the dead of winter. She watched him sometimes, the way he moved with quiet discipline, as if his every task was penance for something he still carried. At night, they spoke by the fire. Sometimes they shared simple things, recipes, memories of old pets, songs they half remembered from childhood. And other nights, they said nothing at all, just sat there with the flames flickering across the silence between them. Until one night, he asked her, "What made you stay so long?" She didn't pretend not to understand. She looked down at Leo instead, sleeping in a bundle beside her. "I was 17 when we met," she said. He was. Charismatic, older, rich. Everyone told me I was lucky, that I'd never have to struggle the way my mother did. And at first, he was gentle. He said all the right things. Vincent waited. Then one day, I burned a roast. Just that, something small, and he didn't yell. He just stared at me like I'd betrayed him, like I'd failed a test I didn't know I was taking. She swallowed. After that, it was always like that. Small things. Missed cues. The wrong laugh. A stain on his shirt. And every mistake chipped away at me. Until I didn't recognize myself anymore. Vincent's voice was quiet. "That's not your fault. I know that," she whispered. But sometimes, knowing isn't enough to make it feel true. He nodded slowly. "Abuse doesn't always leave marks you can show," he said. "It's quieter, slower. It convinces you you're lucky to be there, even when you're dying inside." Eliza looked up at him. "You speak like you've seen it." Vincent didn't answer right away. He reached into a drawer, pulled out an old photo. 3 men in suits. arms around each other, smiles that didn't quite reach their eyes. Vincent was younger in the photo, leaner, but still him. "That's me," he said. "And that one in the middle? That's Marcus Langdon, CEO of Vetrocorp, billionaire, my best friend for 15 years. Eliza blinked. A name echoed faintly, something she'd seen on news tickers, on the corner of charity event banners, beside sleek silver logos. "I was head of his personal security," Vincent continued. "Not just a bodyguard. I handled his threats, his enemies, his secrets. And there were a lot of them." He stared at the picture, jaw tight. 3 years ago, he ordered a hit on someone, a whistleblower. Said it was business necessity. I said no. He fired me, silenced me, had my accounts frozen, my reputation ruined. Suddenly, I was unstable, a liability, a man with a grudge. Eliza felt cold all over. "I lost everything," he said, "but I kept this place. My grandfather built it, off the grid. And when the world turned its back, I came here to remember who I was before I started protecting monsters." Silence settled over them like a second snowfall. Eliza's voice was soft. "You could have let us freeze in that garage." He looked at her then, eyes steady. "You walked in carrying a baby and a backpack full of nothing but fear. I saw the look in your eyes. I used to see that look in the mirror." Her throat closed. She turned toward the fire, blinking hard. That night, as she lay in bed with Leo curled against her, she thought of all the moments she'd been made to feel small, and how Vincent, without ever raising his voice, had made her feel seen instead. Maybe safety wasn't silence. Maybe it was recognition. They built new routines. Vincent taught her how to split wood, how to spot animal tracks in the snow, how to listen for wind shifts before storms. She taught him how to swaddle a crying baby, how to soothe fevers with herbs, how to laugh at nothing again. They never spoke of the city until the postcard arrived. It came tucked under the cabin door one icy morning. No return address. Just one sentence scrawled in red ink. "You can't hide what's mine." Eliza's hands shook as she handed it to Vincent. His face went still. "Do you think he found us?" she asked. Vincent didn't answer right away. He opened a hidden panel in the floor, a stash of supplies, burner phones, a map marked with escape routes. He handed her one of the phones. "We'll leave before dusk. But where would we go?" He looked her in the eyes. "Anywhere. As long as you and Leo are safe." She didn't want to ask the next question, but it burned in her throat. "Would you come with us?" Vincent hesitated. "Eliza," he said gently, "I don't get to have a future." "Not really." "But you do. You're the kind of person the world tried to break, and you're still standing." Her eyes filled. "That's not fair." "No," he said, with the ghost of a smile. "But maybe it's just." She wanted to argue, to tell him he mattered, that he'd become the first safe place she'd ever known. But Leo started to cry, and the sound pulled them both back to the present, back to survival, back to the road they left that night under a moonless sky. No headlights, no goodbyes. But as they drove, Eliza glanced over at Vincent, this man who had once guarded billionaires, and now guarded her. And she knew this wasn't the end of their story. It was just the part where things got harder, and maybe better. The motel was just outside the county line, one of those places that didn't ask for ID, as long as you paid in cash and didn't bleed on the sheets. Eliza sat on the edge of the bed, rocking Leo in her arms. The hum of the heater barely masked the pounding in her chest. Vincent stood near the window, the curtain lifted just a crack, his shoulders taut as stone. "Third car in the lot hasn't moved since we got here," he murmured. She swallowed. "Could be nothing. Could be someone watching." He said it without fear, without drama. Just a statement of probability, of experience. Eliza hated how quickly she'd learned to live like this, measuring silences, memorizing exits, keeping her shoes near the door at all times. What if he never stops? She whispered. What if no matter where we go, he finds us? Vincent let the curtain fall, turned to her. Then we stopped running. She looked up at him, startled. What does that mean? His voice was low. Measured. It means we expose him, make him visible. Men like that, your husband, Langdon, all of them, they feed on secrecy. Power works best in the dark. You said he ruined you for speaking out. He did, Vincent said. But I'm not the same man now. And you're not the same woman. Eliza shook her head. We have nothing. No money, no lawyers, no voice. Vincent stepped closer. We have truth. And people still listen to truth if it bleeds enough. Her stomach turned. I don't want to bleed anymore? I know, he said softly. That's why I'll do it. But Eliza stood, rising with Leo in her arms. No, I won't hide while someone else fights for me again. Their eyes met. Something passed between them. Respect, maybe more. She sat Leo down gently in the crib they'd fashioned from drawers and blankets, then turned back to Vincent with a steadiness she hadn't known she had. Tell me your plan. The next day, they drove into the city under cover of early morning fog. Not to the police, not to a shelter, but to a journalist. Her name was Rivera, a hard-edged woman in her 40s, with deep-set eyes and the kind of silence that demanded answers. Vincent had protected her once, years ago, when she uncovered corporate bribery at a pharmaceutical company. She owed him. And more importantly, she trusted him. Now, Eliza sat in Rivera's office, her hands gripping a paper cup of stale coffee as she told her story. Every detail, every bruise, every manipulation. She showed text messages, photos, receipts. And finally, the hospital reports she'd hidden in a Bible for safekeeping, the ones from when she miscarried her first child after being pushed down the stairs. Rivera said nothing for a long time, just stared at the documents as if they were graves. Then she asked, You sure you want this public? Eliza nodded. Once it's out there, he'll come at you harder. I'm not afraid anymore, she said. I've already died once. I'm just learning how to live now. Rivera looked to Vincent, who offered a silent nod of approval. All right, she said. I'll run it. But we'll need protection. I'll handle that, Vincent replied. He did. He contacted a friend from his old world, a disgraced pie named Kern, who now lived out of a storage unit and owed Vincent more than one favor. Kern planted cameras, monitored chatter, set up alerts for any mention of Eliza or Leo online. For days, they waited. Eliza tried to stay calm. She read to Leo, cooked simple meals in their kitchenette, tried to believe the world could shift on the weight of one woman's truth. Then the article dropped. He called her his wife. Behind closed doors, she was his prisoner. The story exploded online. Overnight, Eliza's name was everywhere, blurred for her protection, but still powerful. The comments flooded in. Disbelief, outrage, solidarity. Other women came forward, quietly at first, then publicly. Stories that echoed her own. Different names. Same cages. And with them came the threats. Anonymous calls. Photos of Leo's stroller left outside the motel. A dead pigeon nailed to their door. Vincent stayed close, never left her alone. He taught her how to use a stun gun, how to tell if a car was following, how to read silence like a language. One night, as they sat by the window listening to the static hum of their radio, Eliza turned to him. Why are you still here? Vincent didn't answer right away. He looked out at the parking lot, the street lamp casting a soft glow over empty spaces. Because once, he said, someone saved me. When I didn't think I was worth saving. She waited. My mother, he continued. I was 15, ran with a gang, thought I was untouchable. One night I got caught breaking into a pharmacy. Cops were ready to throw me in juvie. My mother stood in front of them and said, "Take me instead." He exhaled slowly. They let me go. She did 6 months for obstruction. When she came out, her hair had gone gray. Her hands shook. But she never blamed me. Just said, "Now make it worth something." Eliza swallowed hard. "And did you?" "I tried," he said. "Failed a lot. But maybe this is part of it." She reached for his hand. He didn't pull away. Outside, the world continued, cars, horns, neon signs flickering. But inside, something had shifted. Not love, exactly. Not yet. But something sturdy. Something true. The next night, Eliza woke to the sound of glass shattering. Leo cried out. Vincent was already up, gun drawn, moving like water across the floor. 2 men in black, balaclavas pulled low, were at the door. They didn't say a word, but Eliza knew. Her husband had found her, and he didn't come to negotiate. The first man reached for the crib. He never got the chance. Vincent moved faster than Eliza had ever seen, fluid, focused, lethal. One sharp blow to the wrist, another to the knee. The man dropped with a grunt, hitting the motel floor with a sickening crunch. The second one hesitated. That was his mistake. Vincent tackled him into the wall, the force shaking the plaster. They struggled. A knife flashed. Blood followed. Eliza screamed, not because of the violence, but because she saw the blade pierce Vincent's side deep, just above the hip. The second man tried to run. Vincent staggered, but caught him by the collar, slammed him into the dresser hard enough to shatter the mirror. He dropped like a stone. Silence. Broken glass. A baby crying. Blood on the floor. Eliza knelt beside Vincent. "You're bleeding," she gasped. He grimaced. "Could be worse." She pressed her hands to the wound, trembling. "You need a hospital." "No hospitals," he muttered. "They'll find us again. Finish the job." Eliza looked around the ruined room. 2 unconscious attackers. Leo wailing. The door off its hinges. Something inside her clicked. Hardened. She wasn't a victim anymore. Not a guest in someone else's fight. She was the fire now. They tied up the men with lamp cords and used duct tape from the bathroom to bind their mouths. One was semi-conscious, groaning. The other hadn't moved since Vincent slammed him. Eliza took the burner phone, called Rivera. "We've been attacked." Silence. Then, "Are you safe?" "No," Eliza said, "but I'm ready." They drove again. Vincent insisted on driving despite the blood, though his knuckles were white on the steering wheel. He refused to stop, refused to let her do it. "You've already carried enough," he said, voice strained. She didn't argue, just held Leo and prayed. Rivera met them at a safe house, this time not a motel, but a real home. Old, secure, owned by someone who'd spent decades protecting activists during Brazil's dictatorship, and now lent his walls to women on the run. There, Vincent collapsed. Rivera's contact stitched him in silence. No questions. No judgment. Just antiseptic, thread, and steady hands. When it was done, Eliza sat beside him, watching his chest rise and fall. "You should have let me fight," she whispered. Vincent's eyes fluttered open. "I did." And then he slept. The next morning, Rivera called a press conference. This time, Eliza stood beside her. The 2 men who broke into the motel were now in police custody, caught on camera by Kern's surveillance system. One of them had direct financial ties to Eliza's husband-wired payments, encrypted messages, even a photo of them together at a yacht party. Rivera showed it all. The press devoured it. And for the first time, the predator looked like prey. But the war wasn't over. Later that day, Rivera pulled Eliza aside. "He's filed an emergency custody suit," she said, "claiming you're mentally unstable, homeless, and putting Leo at risk." Eliza's stomach dropped. "He's really going to use the system?" Rivera nodded. "People like him always do. They lose in one arena. They move to another." Eliza clenched her fists. "What do I do?" Rivera's eyes softened. "You fight. In court. With evidence. With voice. And this time, you won't be alone." The courtroom smelled of wood polish and cold air. Her husband sat across from her, smug in a tailored suit, flanked by lawyers. He hadn't looked at her since they entered the room. She stared at the back of his head. Felt nothing. No fear. No rage. Just a strange clarity. Vincent sat beside her, not officially, just close enough to be a shadow at her back. Eliza's voice didn't shake when she took the stand. She told the judge everything. The bruises, the surveillance, the threats, the miscarriage, the motel attack. She showed the messages, played the audio recordings, even handed over the blood-stained knife from the assault. Her husband's face twitched once, only once, when she said, "He didn't just want to punish me. He wanted to erase me." There was silence in the room, and the judge cleared her throat. "Miss Hartley," she said, "you are hereby granted sole custody, full protection under the Violence Against Women Act, and the court recommends criminal prosecution against your ex-husband for conspiracy to commit assault." Eliza blinked. It was over. No, not over, but beginning again. Outside the courthouse, she held Leo tight in her arms. Vincent stood beside her, arms still wrapped in bandages. "What now?" she asked. He smiled faintly. "Now we live." She turned to him, really turned, and said the words she'd never allowed herself to say before. "You saved us." His gaze was steady. "You saved yourself. I just made sure you didn't have to do it alone." She stepped closer. "Then don't leave now." Vincent hesitated. His whole life had been a string of departures, of watching over people from a distance. But Eliza was not someone who needed watching. She was someone worth staying for. He nodded. "I won't." They didn't kiss. Not yet. But something passed between them, deeper than romance. A vow, not of love, of home. Spring came quietly that year. No parades of blossoms. No loud declarations. Just the soft, persistent thaw of ice loosening its grip on the earth. A slow return to warmth. 3 months after the custody ruling, Eliza and Leo moved into a small house on the edge of a forgotten town where no one asked too many questions. The rent was cheap, the neighbors distant, and the mornings filled with birdsong instead of sirens. Vincent moved in too, not as a protector, not as a shadow, but as someone rebuilding beside them. They didn't define the shape of what they had. They didn't need to. Some bonds grow in silence, like roots under snow. Leo began to babble, to laugh. It startled Eliza the first time. A bubbling, unrestrained giggle as he splashed in the sink while she washed dishes. She froze, turned, watched him, listened. Then she laughed too. They laughed until they cried. Vincent came in, soaked from rain, and found them both breathless on the floor. He smiled, set down the groceries, said nothing. That's how healing began. Not with milestones, but with moments. Eliza started writing again. In college, before she'd dropped out to marry a man everyone said was her golden ticket, she'd studied literature. Words had been her sanctuary once, and now they became her fire. She began anonymously publishing essays about survival, about silence, about the lie of perfection. People read them, wrote back, sent their own stories in return. She didn't hide anymore, and neither did Vincent. One afternoon, he showed Leo how to change the oil on their rusted old car. The toddler barely understood, But Vincent's patience never broke, not even once. Later that night, Eliza sat beside him on the porch, sipping tea as fireflies blinked in the grass. "You could have disappeared forever," she said softly. "No one would have blamed you." Vincent shrugged. "I almost did." She looked at him. "Why didn't you?" He didn't answer for a long time. Then, quietly, "Because I saw what happens when good people give up. I've seen what power unchecked can do. I didn't want to just survive. I wanted to undo something." Eliza nodded slowly. "And did you?" He looked at her, at Leo, sleeping in her arms, and smiled. "Maybe I just started." One day, a letter came, official, from a government agency. The investigation into her ex-husband had gained traction. Testimonies were piling up. Financial crimes, hidden surveillance, obstruction of justice. His corporate empire was collapsing. He might face trial. Eliza didn't cheer. She didn't celebrate. She just felt light, like something had been lifted. Not revenge, not victory, just release. That night, she and Vincent walked the edge of the woods behind their home. She asked him a question she hadn't dared until then. "What would you have done if I hadn't walked into your garage that night?" Vincent smiled without humor. "Probably stayed buried, waiting for the world to forget me." She stopped walking, turned to him. "You saved me," she said. "And you say I saved myself. But you let me be seen. That's not small." He met her eyes. "And you reminded me I still had something to give, that I wasn't finished." They stood in the dark, not as broken people piecing themselves together, but as something stronger, not healed, not whole, just human, honest. Years later, Eliza would tell Leo the story, not all at once, but in small pieces, like stones laid on a path. She told him that once they had run from monsters, that once the world felt too big and too cold, that people will sometimes try to dim your light just to feel brighter themselves. But she also told him about a man who used to guard the rich and chose instead to guard the truth. A man who lived alone until he chose connection over comfort. And she told Leo that he had never been a burden. He had been the reason she ran, the reason she stayed, the reason she believed she could become something more than what she'd been made to feel. Sometimes she caught Vincent watching them, Leo on his shoulders, giggling through the trees, or asleep on his chest during storms. And in Vincent's eyes, she saw something she never saw in her ex-husband's. Awe, not of power, not of possession, but of life, of survival, of the sacredness of second chances. They never married. They didn't need to. Some love isn't made of rings or paperwork. Some love is made of shelter, of staying, of saying, "You are safe here, even when the world is not." And when Leo grew older and asked why they moved so much, why his mom sometimes stared at the door before unlocking it, why Vincent's hands shook on loud nights, Eliza told him, "We were running from a man who didn't know how to love. But we ran into someone who did. Someone who knew what it meant to protect without control, to hold without hurting." And Leo, who had grown into a gentle boy with steady hands and an open heart, nodded, as if he understood the cost of peace, as if he knew it had been paid in full, not by violence, but by choosing one another, over and over again.